Hey everyone, welcome back to CryptoCache. Thank you so much for joining me here. Hope you're having an amazing day. We're going to take a look at Bitcoin here again, of course, see what's going on. And obviously, if you're not currently a community member, consider joining. I do have a link in the description below, CryptoCache.tech, if you want to become a better trader. I love teaching people how to trade, and that is my passion. And I can assure you that it's not that difficult to survive the market. And I say survive because oftentimes in cases like this, it's all about being patient and dollar cost averaging and making sure that you are waiting for the right time to strike, and obviously making sure that you don't just jump in and get wrecked, right? That can happen quite a lot, so just be careful. Anyways, enough about that. CryptoCache.tech. Check out the website if you're interested in becoming a better trader. I've got Trading Academy, send out signals, the whole 9 yards. Should be a pretty good, decent option for you. Now, looking at Bitcoin, here's something we got to understand. The 1 day chart is not looking great. Okay. Big surprise, right? Yeah, no, it's pretty obvious. I know I'm just kind of speaking rhetorically there, but on the same accord, yeah, it's digressing. We're seeing that bearish divergence. It was supposed to have bounced up to 41.5. That was the expectation on Friday and or over the weekend. That didn't happen. Instead, we got this bearish divergence that's continuing, and we're having difficulty breaking past the 50-day simple moving average. But more importantly, we keep legging down, so to speak, into these interesting little areas. And what I mean by that is just that it's a pretty natural progression to come down the way that it has based on everything that's going on in the world. But on the same accord, too, it's also going to continue as well for a little bit longer. At least that's the likelihood. Okay. So what I mean by that here is that if we look at TD sequential here, first of all, let's go and kind of go with, we'll start with this here. If you see previously, first of all, when it's retracing, pretty much anytime it retraces, it comes down to an 8 or a 9. So you see this here, we got an 8, and then we came up to a 5, and then down to a 9. We got a reset up to an 8, like down, and back up to a 7. So there's kind of a, I wouldn't say it's a specific pattern, because obviously it's kind of just doing what it wants when it wants. But for the most part, when it comes to an 8 or a 9, we have a tendency of seeing that turnaround. So just kind of want to throw that out there. If you're not familiar with TD sequential, really cool indicator, kind of letting you know, exhaustion and letting you know how far in a one direction you can go. We're at a 5 right now. So just kind of throwing it out there to preface, let you know there is possibility of about 4 more days worth of continuation. Now, there's no guarantees going to hit a 9, turn right around. There's no guarantees going to hit a 9 anyways. We could see a turnaround today, but that's just something to understand here. We're halfway through this exhaustive phase, and with all this bearish continuation, it shouldn't last but until the end of the week. So, I mean, if there's any consolation, the weekend should provide some positive, if that makes any sense, right? Again, a lot of stuff's going to happen between now and then, but that's just kind of the thing to kind of understand generally how that works. Also, too, obviously, we broke this key level trend line. Okay, that is not helpful at all because obviously this continuation of the upside is no longer. Doesn't mean it's not going to turn around anytime soon. It just means that we're probably going to see it continue to come down and get rejected off that if it were to try to come back up. Speaking of rejection, today it did look like the price bounced off 40,000. We'll look at that here in a moment. So 40,000 is now the key level resistance, previous support. Okay. That's kind of where we're at. But me personally, big picture, I'm not going to consider, Bitcoin bullish on the short term until we can get back up over the 50-day SMA and or 40/41,000. This is a pretty strong little resistance channel now, and we got to respect the fact that it's probably going to have some difficulty getting past that. Okay. So again, this little range here, 40 to 41.5, is probably going to be a strong resistance channel, and it's proven that so far here today. Okay, and we'll look at that again. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek, of course, at the RSI. We can see we're well below 50, and to me, anything under 50 is considered more bearish, specifically on the 1 day chart, because you could see we had a nice little bullish continuation that was lasting for some time, and we dropped below that pretty hard. We also have this bearish divergence starting to progress. And I want to tell you something here. When it comes to the MACD convergence / divergence, when you see that this continuation happen, it can last for a long time. So I mean, obviously, you look at this here. That was what, almost 2 to 3 weeks worth of bullish continuation, right? So we had a MACD convergence on the 28th of January, which is right here, and it continued upwards for some time until it lost that momentum. So just know that even if this were to come down and to possibly try to swing upwards, so to speak, there's no reason for it to continue. Sometimes, a lot of times, it'll bounce off and keep going the other way. So I would recommend using the MACD convergence. Kind of take it with a grain of salt, if you will. But on the same accord, understand that it takes a while for that turnaround to happen on the macro level. Which again, the 1 day chart, those time frames, we want to kind of understand that and just I guess, respect the fact that we've got this bearish divergence and it could very well continue for a lot longer than we're hoping for. So just be mindful of that. Right. So that's kind of where we're at there. And again, the same analogy applies. I've said this before. If you fall down a flight of stairs, it's going to take a long time to recover, right? Instead of just tripping maybe and falling and bruising your knee, for example, you can recover from that. Well, this was a pretty significant fall. I mean, Bitcoin dropped 10% in one trading day and then another 5 or 10% over the last couple of trading days. Okay. So that's a pretty significant decrease. Yes, it can recover, but it shouldn't either, right? We shouldn't expect it to happen because it takes a while for the price to average out when it's coming down that far. Okay. So I just want you to kind of recognize that and just try to be real here. Yes, we saw a nice little green candle here today so far when the market opened. And honestly, that shouldn't be something that you want to I guess just get super excited about, right? I try to be real. I try not to be one of those doom and gloom idiots, or perhaps the inverse, where I'm going to tell you it's going to moon every single day. That's not the case. I do think Bitcoin is likely going to test its all-time high, perhaps later this year, maybe even next year. But for now, we got to respect the fact that there's a lot of crazy nonsense that's actually affecting the market. And until that kind of subsides, this is being a secondary market for most investors. They're going to sell their positions in cryptocurrency first before they sell their regular positions in the traditional market. We just got to understand that. And it's a volatile market for a reason because it's still very new. 20, 30 years down the road, you're going to be happy that you continued to stick with it. But for now, we just kind of got to ride the wave. All right, enough about that. So we're we're down below the both moving averages, right? So if you can see this here on my screen, the purple and the orange, essentially basically telling us the 50 and the 200 are effectively above the price action. That's never traditionally a good sign. That's working as a resistance. We need to be able to have that average itself out. And it takes a little while for it to average out, right? It's going to come down slowly and progress, and it's going to take a few days and or weeks perhaps to have that come back into play. In other words, when those prices are above those support levels, or these working as resistances now, when they get back above, it's considered a support. And at this point, we're definitely well below that. Okay. So at this time, we got to just understand that 40,000 is probably going to continue to work as a strong resistance. So you can see it was tested 1, 2, now 3 days in a row, so to speak, or sorry, 3 4-hour candlesticks. That's basically a half a day, 12 hours in a row, where the price has had difficulty getting back above. Now I know that's a little early, premature, but I'm speculating we're probably not going to see a price above 40,000 for a little while. So I just want to kind of come to terms with that. I want you to be realistic here, and regardless of the fact that the RSI is close to 30 and or below 30 recently, doesn't mean it's going to bounce back and recover strong. Yes, this natural little kick pullback happens because the fact that you can only hold something underwater for so long, right? You've maybe heard me say that analogy. A flotation device, for example, it's gonna surface eventually, right? That's how prices are too. They got to recover somewhat, but when you're in this downward trend, you want to make sure that you stick with the trend and you work alongside it. That implies that short positions are much more advantageous right now than long positions. And if you want to consider, shorting, it might be a better call than the average inverse of taking a long position and buying high, or buying low and selling high, right? So again, just something to think about. But at this point on the 4-hour chart, we're looking not great, but we did have that effective bounce off of 30 on the RSI recently here. Guys, it's like, hey, we're not letting the price go much lower here than 37.8. What is that? Yeah, 37,800. Technically, the lowest point here is about 37,200. So keep in mind the 37,000 range is possible, and I think anything lower than that is still very likely, right? So again, this MACD convergence here, right, would have given you a big, nice long-term position. Like, hey, normally you want to take a swing trade based on a MACD convergence. But you also need to understand the big picture too. That's why we look at the 1-day chart first and work our way down, because if you just take a 4-hour MACD convergence and go all in, you're going to get wrecked. And that's just the nature of how things work in crypto. So again, do yourself a favor, do a full analysis. Start with a 1 month or 1 week even if you want. Honestly, it's very helpful to look at the big picture and see the overall trend. The weekly, we're still looking pretty decent, but on the macro there for the daily, it's still not great, and it takes a while for this 1 and 4 hour time frames to effectively affect that, right? And right now, we're not seeing that. The 4-hour chart is really telling us it's a mess, and we want to probably steer clear of any type of, I guess, short-term swing trade position. It's kind of a mess right now. We need a little bit more consolidation first. What I mean by a mess here is, I mean, you look at this. This is a what the pre-market hours roughly we decreased by about 5%, and as soon as the market opened, we increased by almost 5% and got rejected by 40,000. Again, that's not a good sign. We typically don't like to see that because this candle basically implies that we should see a turnaround, and it's not going to make that higher high or higher low. Okay. So again, the likelihood of this coming down, testing this support level here right around 37.8, maybe 38,000 roughly, and kind of going sideways is likely. I think we're going to probably see some channel trading for a little while, or at least if you were a channel trader and you can identify that, hey, we're in this channel here, we're going to trade within this range. There's range trading that can occur. Again, you want to be cautious and careful because it hasn't effectively created that channel yet. Yes, we've got a high and a low so far, but generally speaking, we should probably expect the price to kind of transition sideways, I would imagine here. More consolidation between 38 and 40. That's probably more realistic, possibly even as low as 37.5 as it's already tested so far here today. So again, we can't rule anything out, and I think the likelihood of it just continuing down is pretty high. In fact, we can kind of look at this little trend here as well. It's pretty much just going straight down, so to speak, right? So I think the logic of wanting the price to go up is sound in the sense of wanting to having that hope, right? But hope has no place in trading. Okay, so don't just be a hopeful trader and try to buy the next dip and think it's going to be the bottom. We don't know where the bottom is going to be. The key to being a good trader isn't to find the bottom and to sell at the lowest, to buy at the lowest point and buy and sell at the highest point. That is not good trading. That's just being kind of ridiculous because you'll never find the bottom or the top. What's being a good trader is identifying trends and understanding which way it's going. It's going down right now, right? And then once it hits its bottom, it'll probably go sideways for some time because there's three phases, right? You've got this phase here, which we're in right now, this type of divergence is kind of a downward channel. Then there's a second channel where if it averages out, kind of starts range trading, then that's another channel. That's a type of trader essentially that likes to trade inside of a range where it hits the top, they sell at the top, buy at the bottom, etc. It's kind of an easy way to go. And then the last option too is of course the most optimal, where you're trading on an uptrend where the price is coming up. But the key is to identify each trend, right? We are still in this trend here and we are not in range trading yet. So until we can get into this channel, so to speak, and the price starts to recover, we're still going to be stuck in the position that we're at. Okay. So again, just try to help yourself in big picture by identifying the trend and what's going on, and then use that to your advantage. And this is not a bad trend if you're opening a bunch of short positions, right? Again, those are more risky. I recommend being very cautious and careful. Use leverage very, very carefully, and only use a small percentage of your portfolio. I cover all this in my trading academy, and I reiterate this to my community. It's important to be very careful, of course. I like to be patient and try to find the best opportunity when things hit its most critical point. Again, with what you see here, this is not terrible as long as you're trading in that direction, right? The trend can be your friend as long as you pick the right side. And the bears are in control. There's no doubt about it, okay? All right, anyways, enough about that. Let's go ahead and do one last thing. I'll call it a day. Let's go ahead and take a look at, of course, well, TD sequential is probably going to give us a bunch of resets. We came up to an 8 previously. So again, when you hit an 8 right there at a key level resistance at 40,000, that might have been a good shorting opportunity. I was sleeping at that point. I couldn't catch it, of course, but obviously if you see something like that, that might be a good expectation of a turnaround. You hit an 8 or a 9 on TD sequential, it's a very strong likelihood we'll see a pullback, especially in a downward trend right now. All right, so we've identified a downward trend. We hit an 8. The price should have came down. That makes sense. And also, too, to note as well is Ichimoku Cloud is going to tell us that we're kind of messy right now. And this is the reason why I say trading right now is probably not that smart. Not that it's dumb to trade, but it's not ideal conditions, right? Or this potential pivot point where the price is coming down is trying to establish its support effectively. And when you see the lagging span jumping around here up and down within the price action, it pretty much means that you want to close your position if you have one open, and you might want to wait for that actual confirmation. So just say the price were to continue to progress downwards, then we'll see this lagging span come free and clear of price action. That might be a consideration to take entry, but even still, it seems pretty messy. I would honestly probably try to wait a good 24 to 48 hours before you trade. Again, depending on the type of trade position you like to take. There's a lot of different traders out there, so it's a difficult way to address a strategy at this point. What's the best strategy in some cases when you have a market like this is to take no position. I know it seems crazy and kind of weird, like, hey, how can I be a trader if I'm not trading? Well, some of the best traders are those who sit patiently and wait for the right time to strike. And I don't think there's really a right time now. Granted, there's a possibility we might see a pullback down even further in this same trading day here, but it's still early and premature. There's nothing really giving us an indication it's going to turn around, except for this candlestick, pretty much being a hammer down, and the fact that it should turn around, of course, and continue downwards, but there's no guarantees, right? So the best thing we can do with this in this scenario, once again, you've heard me say this plenty of times before, is just consider dollar cost averaging. In other words, think about it this way, like if you were to invest just one time today, put all your money into Bitcoin at 38,000, eventually the price will likely go up and you'll have a decent price point. But if you continue, just say for example, once a week to add to your position as the price continues to go down, you're going to have a much better average, right? So I highly recommend putting a small amount of whatever you have into your portfolio, or Tether, etc. Just using a small amount into Bitcoin and or other coins, and try not to just exhaust your resources. Okay. And if possible, of course, introduce a small amount, whatever is most comfortable for you, as per investment guidelines. A typical dollar cost average is to add to your position as the price goes down, and even when it goes up too. Okay. You give a better overall average in most cases, because I mean, generally speaking, the next few months, we should expect Bitcoin to kind of be doing this range trading between somewhere between 35 and possibly even 55,000, somewhere in that range. That's just, again, a loose estimate. I'm not saying that's the channel, but in general, we're going to see like some sideways action plus or minus 20,000. That's probably going to be the case until it goes on its run and we get these large market investors getting back into Bitcoin. Right now, it's kind of a mess and a show, and they're kind of just taking time, and there's a lot less volatility than we're used to seeing, and there has to be a reason for them to want to get back in, and they're not, right? So again, please be careful, please be cautious, and once more, sometimes the best position you can take is no position. And I would maybe recommend doing so at this point. I don't foresee Bitcoin just shooting right off here. There's no reason for it. Yes, we're a bit on the overextended side to the downside, but we still got 4 or 5 more days left of continuation if you do consider TD sequential on the 1-day chart. Okay. Again, we're at a 5. There's a good chance we'll see this continue downwards from here. One last thing here, we want to look at just to quickly note on the 4. Yeah, it's kind of ugly. We hit a 9 though, if you can see that. We went a 9 and a secondary 9, and then we saw the pullback. So, as I expected yesterday, we did have some type of pullback. It came up to reject at 40,000, so that wasn't really all that much. It was basically a $1,000 jump. But right now, as you can see here, we got 111, bunch of resets. It doesn't really know what it wants to do right now. And those are kind of choppy waters, and I try to avoid that in most cases altogether. So I'm going to wait a little bit longer until we have some kind of confirmation of what direction it's heading. Yes, it's likely going to continue down, but it could also be finding its bottom soon, because there's a decent amount of volume here at this range between 35 and 38. So we already noticed that we had a strong volume profile here right around 37.5, and ultimately we should expect to see the price continue to go either sideways or down. I think it's more likely to go down and sideways than it is to come back up right now. Okay. All right, we'll take another look at it tomorrow. So hopefully you found benefit here, of course. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're not currently a community member, look forward to working with you. CryptoCache.tag is the site, and we'll look forward to hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again for your time. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.